Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And as you see, we are in Parshat Pinchas, as we've been this past week, and moving slowly through the last sections of Parshat Pinchas that deal with the festivals, the circle of the festival year, and of course the offerings that were brought. First the daily offering, then the weekly offering for Shabbat, and then the Rosh Chodesh offerings, and now we're actually into Pesach, and the offerings and some of the details regarding their observance, right? So, Uvayom Hashvi'i. And on the seventh day, remember it's a 7-day holiday, and on the seventh day, Mikra Kodesh Yelachem, a sacred convocation you shall have, will be for you, literally, is how it comes. Kol melechet avodah lo tasu. And again, this prohibition against what is called elsewhere servile work, which, of course, has to do with the specific laborers that are forbidden on the Shabbat, that are defined, not defined explicitly in the Torah itself. It's interesting, the rabbis describe the laws of Shabbat and the 39 principal categories of labor and all the dependent activities that are therefore forbidden, as well as mountains suspended by hairs. And the reason why is because there is so little specifically in the Torah regarding the observance of Shabbat. And the rabbis have to derive the specific prohibitions of labor from the placement of the prohibition of labor and its relationship to the construction of the tabernacle. And so these 39 principles, avot melacha, principal categories of labor, are derived from the various activities that went into making the tabernacle, and such as plowing, because they were like cloths made out of linen, so plowing and sewing and the various activities like that. There's weaving, shearing, cooking, etc., etc., and subsequent derivative categories. But specifically, the Torah doesn't say too much. It says, you shall not kindle a fire in your homes on Shabbat. And there's also a suggestion, there's that statement about the man who went out and gathered sticks on Shabbat, which clearly was forbidden. And there's also, and that would be related also to the fact that when the manna was given, the laws of Shabbat are mentioned there too, at least in terms of not going out and collecting manna on Shabbat, but that there would be a double portion on Friday and that it would last through Shabbat. So there are some very, very, very significant spiritual values and principles that are associated with the observance of Shabbat. However, when it comes to the festivals, it says, as I mentioned in Leviticus, it allows you to cook food for the festival. That is the one thing that is not, um, although it's on Shabbat, it's forbidden, it's permissible because the Torah explicitly says it is permissible on Shabbat. Excuse me, on Yom Tov. Forgive me, not on Shabbat, but on Yom Tov. Forgive me. All right, so let's see. I don't know if there's no Rashi on this, and we're going to go on. So that's basically, we deal with Pesach. So the first day we know, the first day of Pesach is a Yom Tov, and the seventh day, we just learned, the seventh day is also a Yom Tov, and there's a tradition that the seventh day is a Yom Tov because that was the day they crossed the Red Sea. And of course, the Torah reading for the seventh day of Pesach is Shirat Hayam. So the seventh day is a holiday because of how it celebrates the crossing of the Red Sea. Uvayom Habikurim, and on the day of your first harvest. And so that would be the beginning of the wheat harvest, I believe. Behakrivchem mincha chadasha ladonai. When you offer up a new meal offering of meal to the Lord, meaning, of course, an offering from the new crop. B'shavuotchem, right? So there it is, b'shavuotechem, in your weeks. In other words, the festival of weeks, the actual counting out of that 49 days, that is mentioned back in Leviticus, where they talk about the days of the Omer and how they conclude with this festival, of this harvest festival. Mikra Kodesh Yelachem, again, it will be a sacred convocation to you. Kol melechet avodah lo ta'asu, you shall not perform any servile work. So again, doesn't mention anything in the Torah explicitly that it is coming to uh, celebrate the giving of the Ten Commandments. That is done through a chronological calculation of material that is in the Torah. But here we do have this festival as called Shavuot, and you will see it is. They have the shtei halechem, the two loaves of leavened bread that were offered up. And again, as I said, it is to celebrate the first wheat harvest. Let's just take a look. Maybe, yeah, there's a Rashi. Uvayom habikurim, right? On the day of your first harvest. Chag HaShavuot, right? The festival of Shavuot. Karui Bikurei Katsir Chitim. It is named after the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Al Shem, and why? Because Shtei Halechem, those two loaves, Shehem Rishonim Leminchat Chitim, because they are the first offering of the wheat meal offering. Haba'a min hachadash, which comes from the new, the new harvested grain, the newly harvested grain at this time of the year. So if you think about it, it comes in the late spring, and that's at the same time as the wheat harvest. I'm going to check quickly to see if there's Rashi continuing. No, it does not continue on the next page. Okay, and here we go. V'hikravtem olah l'reach nichoach l'Hashem, and you shall also offer up an olah, a whole offering of pleasing savor l'Hashem, or pleasing odor to the Lord. Parim, bowls, nevakar, of the cattle, shnayim, two, ayel echad, one ram, shiva kvasim b'nei shana, and 7 yearling lambs. Uminchatam, and their meal offerings, solet, fine flour, blula vashemen, mixed with oil mixed in, shlosha esronim lapar, so 3 esranim for a bull, ha'echad, for each bull, in other words, shnei esronim la'ayil, 2 esronim for the ram, for the ha'echad, for the one ram, and isaron, and a tenth, lakeves ha'achad, for each one of the lambs, l'shiv'at kavasim, for those 7 lambs. And here we go again. Seir izim echad, right, and one a goat, l'chaper alechem, to make atonement for you. And I just want to remind you of what we had read regarding the Rosh Chodesh offering, where it says Lashem, for the Lord. And here, as you can see, it says explicitly, in order to atone for yourselves. And this is just I would say, just an overall canvas, you might say, to how we look at our lives and the relationship that we have to our Creator. As I realized, religion is really, in general, one of the ways to understand religion has to do with the question of what is our relationship to the universe and to the Creator of the universe. That's the issues, the deep issue that religion tries to address. And the idea that if you look honestly at first of all, the magnificence and the grandeur of the world, right? From the tiniest atom to the fact that they are the life in a microbe, or to a how can I put it, a spider, a spider mite, and to a whale, to large animals, to the grandeur of the universe itself. And that's not even talking about botanicals, which are so amazing as well. And then to human life and the intelligence that is given to human beings and their capabilities. We should be absolutely saturated with a sense of gratitude. Saturated. And then to turn that and say, well, how do we express that thanks? And you could say that the observance of these mitzvot, one understanding of it, is to say it's the very least we can do to thank God for all of this. And with those particular ideas on one side, as opposed to the level of selfishness and self-centeredness and stubbornness that we also have as human beings, to see that there is a level of atonement that every single one, even the most righteous person, requires, because there's just no way for us to really adequately express our gratitude and our thanks. And the truth is that when you are willing to try and see it this way, it really helps. Mike?
And how would you relate that to an atheist who doesn't believe in God? How would you? So what I mean is, how would you tell them to? You should be thankful for everything you uh,
This,
identify in science.
right. So remember, I agree. I hear what you're saying. And obviously, many people are either agnostics or atheists. And I think this is, you know, you have to be in the right place to be able to see life this way. It isn't, again, you've heard me say this so many times, it isn't a light switch. It is something that comes, I think, upon deep reflection and really deep thinking and an attempt to be as honest as you can. Um, I'm not out there to prove to people that God exists. For me, the reason why I am convinced that there is a transcendent and divine element that supports all of existence is because I say to myself, if I'm thinking, what made it possible for me to think? If I have a body and with all its complex, incredibly complex functions, living for the most part pretty well, okay, what is it that created this ability, or even the idea of conception and things like that? These are
I think
goals, but I'm not going to convince an
that's
atheist, and it's
that's really
okay.
where you can where I understand the immorality of atheists, because even though they can acknowledge all of the details in
Mm,
science of nature,
yes.
through science, they still choose to be immoral, right? Selfish and everything.
Well, look, right. And that doesn't go to say, and so it just means that people who would claim to have a religious consciousness when they do those sorts of things, and sometimes they do, how much the worse they are. So, there's a statement, I'm not sure if it's in Proverbs or Ecclesiastes or elsewhere, maybe in the rabbinic tradition, that says God gives wisdom to the wise. And I think that that kind of wisdom has to do with an attempt to be as honest as we can with ourselves. And that's not easy. The truth is, and of course, we've dealt with the question of, well, why are we created in this particular way? And we've discussed that already. And that's the simple answer is that there'd be no purpose to living if there weren't these kind of challenges. And it makes life indeed extremely worth living when you are when experience teaches you to look at things in this way and eventually and apply them to the way in which you behave. So I don't feel it's for me to convince anybody. If people feel I have something worth saying, if people have some feeling that I have something, worth listening to, that's pretty fantastic. The truth is, of course, I do not delude myself to think that, I know that much. I don't. Okay. I mean, the degree of real knowledge that I have is like microscopically small. But at least I have some background, and the background that I do have is, of course, something that I've gained over the years because I try to do some studying every single day, and hopefully something sticks. A lot of it doesn't stick, but
Well,
also experiences of life. Yes, Lauren,
certainly not all atheists are immoral
I
and
agree. I
greedy and
agree.
self-centered.
That's
And
true.
when religious people, not all religious people are good. And when religious people are immoral and self-centered and greedy, they're they have the another layer of being also hypocritical.
Right. I agree.
It's you know it's people are people, and some believe in God and some don't. Some are good and some don't, and those two are not completely overlapping circles. They're a Venn diagram with an
Agreed, Lauren. I hope I've been very clear. Okay. And the other part of this is that because God on so many levels is ineffable, right? There could be, well, atheists who in fact have some sense of a relationship to the universe and a moral sense of an obligation and also a sense of gratitude. But the gratitude really does come, I think, when you have a sense that there is some existent creator that transcends everything else in the world, that in some ways it's easier to try and contextualize your gratitude. I'm not saying that atheists never show gratitude. I don't think that would be a true statement at all. I think that atheists can be extremely moral and not only that, but contribute greatly to the general, the general welfare of the universe as much as we as human beings can do. I mean, a very simple philosophy is as to why we came into this world is to try and leave it a little bit better than we found it. And that goes for everything, that anything we experience, we should try and leave a little bit, that our presence and relationship to it should show that it's better than it was when we came into it, that there was something we contributed positively. You don't have to believe in God. And not only that, the talk about belief in God, it's language, it's an approximation, it's an attempt to try and verbalize ideas that are actually extremely exalted and difficult and sophisticated. And, it took me a long, 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 long time to sort of be able to ask myself as to the profound reasons as to why I believe in God. And I think I had those beliefs, but weren't able to articulate them as to why. But at this point, I don't think there's any question that given causality and things like that, that there has to be some transcendent level that makes these things possible, and which therefore generates a tremendous level of gratitude on my part. But Lauren, I just want to go back over the point you made, the level of hypocrisy of people who claim to be religious and claim to believe in God and then violate the principle of what is hateful to you, don't do to other people. I think Hillel was incredibly wise when he made that statement. You can observe what is hateful to you, don't do to other people as an atheist. It's just that maybe as an atheist, you don't have the how can I put it, the
I
way
was
in
I
which
was actually
he
I was
says,
actually talking I was talking actually talking about more like on a broader scale, like national scale,
yeah,
countries that have adopted,
right.
atheism, such as China and the Far East itself broadly has adopted atheism versus the West, which is like, Christian or Muslim or Jewish.
Or Muslim.
Jewish
By the
being the
way,
best
most
one.
most of the world's population actually happens to be Muslim.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
the West is like highly ethical, whereas the East, they have a very high degree of unethicalness. I mean, you hear
I
about
would
the
not agree
cyber
with
tech,
that. Michael,
huh?
respectfully, I would disagree with you. I would.
Uh,
I think that the Far East has a far deeper sense of respect, of how important respect is, that it's built into the culture, respect for elders, respect for ancestors, You can be an atheist and still not necessarily worship your ancestors, but at least have a deep, deep sense of gratitude of the fact that, we stand on the shoulders of giants. But I sense that Eastern culture has a very, very puts a great deal of importance. We put importance on what we call love, which I think we often confuse with lust. And I think in the Far East, my sense is that there's a
Well,
deep sense of respect.
those are their ancient
Hospitality.
traditional roots, but their modern roots are atheist. They adopted atheist
Yeah, no,
just like
no,
the
no.
last century.
Right. No, I
So
don't agree.
talking
Lauren,
about
yeah,
yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry, Michael. Finish. Go ahead. If you have something you wanted to add, I didn't mean to interrupt. Okay. Lauren?
Well, I'm just saying that, yeah, and Middle Eastern culture's very known for hospitality and for treating people like family that they've never met, and it's a very good quality. And but we, have a very bad government, and the one person government claims to be religious, and Israel has a very bad government,
Yeah.
and Israel claims to be a Jewish country, but their actions have often not been consistent with Jewish teachings. And, as far as atheist governments, I can think of places like China and Russia, but those are, again, the governments, and they don't represent all the people. And people are people, and no matter what their government is, they have their own beliefs. They may have to pretend that they don't in some situations, because they're afraid of their governments, and
Exactly, yeah.
they might get fired and if they annoy the person in charge.
Right. They have to protect themselves. Yes.
Yeah, but really, it's people are people, and it has nothing to do with where you live. Culture certainly influences where you live, including atheistic governmental cultures. But
Absolutely.
people are people, and inside they're one thing, and what they have to do is to be part of their country may be something that they don't prefer, but that they need to protect themselves.
Right. So listen, if it's okay, let's finish up because let's at least get this chapter completed. We have one more verse. Right? We got into this discussion because I introduced the idea of the need for this goat as a sin offering on top of what was going on here. I guess the only other thing that I would add to this little piece is the ability to perform positive commandments such as these acts, these deeply significant and sacred acts, presumes a level of purity of behavior. And for a person to do these, to do public worship, but at the same time be engaged in things that are immoral, etc., is actually a desecration of God. So in a way, this goat comes to give us a little bit of insurance to say we're not doing this thing because we think we're so righteous. We're doing these things because God has commanded us to do these things, and we recognize the fact that it's not for us to determine what God wants. So okay, milvad olah tatamid. Okay, apart from the perpetual olah, right? In other words, that daily olah, uminchato, and its meal offerings, ta'asu, you shall perform. So that's why what we're talking here in these special offerings that were brought on Shavuot are known as musafim, additional offerings, that is to say, additional to the daily offering, right? Mil ta'asu, you shall perform. Tmimim yulachem, they shall be pure for you, veniskehem, and their libations, So we have a final chapter here on the seventh month, which, please God, if we are still around next year, we hope to do and cover. So that is it for today and for this week. And I'm very grateful to have been able to do as much as we have. Let me make sure. Okay, here we go. We've got little Rashi to do. I'm going to try to enlarge the page. Timimim yu lachem v'niskehem. They shall be perfect for you and their libations. Af hanisachim yut mimim. So he's saying it's interesting that the idea of libations, right, which is a offering of wine, that it should also be perfect. Lamdu Rabotenu. So our sages learnt, and this is the reference in Menachot, looks like page 87. Mikan, from this, shehayayin shehe'ela kamachim, right, that if in fact the wine started to show what is this would be like florets of mildew, right, pasul nisachim, it is not usable for libations. So this is, we know that if that wine itself can start to become mildewed, or at least certain things start to grow in it, they cannot be used. So, and that's it for our lesson today. I'm going to stop the share.
FYI, Chabad put moldy scum.
Okay, I might write that in then. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's a
I think yours was fine,
interesting
what you
term.
said.
I'm sorry.
Yours was fine. You don't
Oh,
need
well,
to.
I'm trying to reflect my Sonoma background. Trying to, anyway. All right.